This is Gerald Hyde II, who was just convicted of drug possession at the Benton County Justice Center in Washington State. Hyde was led down the holding cell with other convicts before being taken to prison. But Hyde had other ideas. As an officer turned his back to him, Hyde slipped out and snuck back into the courtroom. He then removed his prison shirt and used it to hide the handcuffs. Hyde then made it down the hallway, ditching his noticeable prison shoes in the process. Before exiting through the lobby and making a run for it out onto the streets. But Hyde's freedom didn't last long. He was recaptured 2 hours after his escape. The 24-year-old was later convicted of second-degree escape and sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison. While Gerald Hyde had a nifty attempt to escape justice, what happens when a convict is so fast even the camera can't keep up? Like in the case of Rayon Woodford, who was in Jefferson County Circuit Court for violating his probation. According to reports, the 29-year-old was previously sentenced to probation for drug and weapon-related charges. Now in court, Woodford's girlfriend sat just a few feet away, showing support during the hearing. A detective took the stand.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be truthful?
That evening, he was charged with a handgun and narcotics.
And if you know, was Mr. Woodford at the time a convicted felon?
Yes, he was.
The courtroom camera remained locked on the witness stand as Judge Barry Willett announced his decision.
Probation revoked in its entirety. Mr. Woodford, I'm going to send you to serve 5 years. Good luck to you. No, ma'am.
Moments later, the unthinkable happened.
Lock the door back up.
There was a flash across the camera as Woodford attempted to make a break for it. His girlfriend could be heard pleading with him to stop.
The record will reflect that Mr. Woodford made an unsuccessful effort to escape.
Woodford's escape was unsuccessful. He was brought back into the courtroom by deputies and arrested. As Woodford was being ushered away, his girlfriend claimed she was pushed and her hair was pulled by a deputy during the scuffle. Judge Willett allowed her to address the court.
I didn't do anything wrong, and he didn't have to put his hands on me, period.
Okay.
But you condoning that, right?
I'm not condoning any. No, wait a minute. Come back up here right now. Don't you tell me I'm condoning anything. I just told you what I observed. You made an effort to stop him from leaving. I appreciate that. But in the thick of it, when your boyfriend is fighting with deputies, people might get pushed out of the way.
Woodford's girlfriend faced no additional charges.
She tearfully leaves the courtroom moments later.
In contrast, Woodford faced an additional charge of second-degree escape on top of his 5-year sentence.
Stop. Stop.
I'm sorry for what happened to your underfoot.
Just stop.
You like in prison.
I made my ruling.
I'm not just some gangbanger that you tried to betray me as.
It was so very hard for me to tell a 5-year-old his dad would never come home.
I don't regret it. The only thing that I regret is that he was killed too. I wish I killed more of those motherfuckers.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. You took it upon yourself to end my son's life. You changed our lives forever.
Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, who was facing murder charges in New York, was involved in a horrific crime that took place on the night of June 20th, 2018. Estrella, along with Manuel Rivera, Elvin Garcia, Jose Minez, and Antonio Santiago, brutally stabbed and killed 15-year-old Leandro Guzman Feliz. All 5 were members of a notorious Dominican gang known as the Trinitarios. Reports indicate that Leandro had left his Bronx apartment to meet a new friend just a few blocks away when 4 cars suddenly pulled up, marking the beginning of the tragic event. Mistaking him for a rival gang member, the cars began chasing Leandro, eventually cornering him near a local bodega. CCTV footage from inside the shop shows a desperate Leandro seeking refuge, frantically trying to hide behind the counter. However, he was soon spotted by one of the gang members. A scuffle ensued, and Leandro was forcibly dragged out of the bodega. What happened next shocked the entire city of New York. Armed with large knives and machetes, the 5 gang members took turns brutally stabbing the helpless teenager. They then fled the scene in getaway cars, leaving Leandro gravely injured. After the attack, a severely injured Leandro managed to re-enter the shop, seeking help, but was tragically sent away. Outside, fading fast, Leandro gestured towards onlookers, desperately trying to signal them to call 911. He then started running towards St. Barnabas Hospital, just a short block away, before collapsing at the entrance. Passers-by desperately tried to save Leandro, but shockingly, 2 police officers stood by, watching the scene unfold. They were later investigated for failing to intervene. Just 20 minutes later, Leandro succumbed to a fatal stab wound to his neck. Police soon obtained the CCTV footage and arrested the 5 suspects, charging them with first-degree murder.
Police have arrested the 5 suspects accused in the murder of this teenager in the Bronx.
At their trial, a 6th member of the Trinitarios gang, Kevin Alvarez, testified against the 5 murderers.
He's testifying in court against 5 of his fellow alleged Trinitarios gang members.
Alvarez, who had helped drag Leandro out of the bodega, identified the suspects in exchange for a lesser sentence on conspiracy charges. Eventually, the jury convicted the 5 gang members for the brutal murder of Leandro Guzman Feliz. At their sentencing, the killers showed no signs of remorse. Instead, they waved gang signs and shouted gang slogans. Jonaiki Estrella, who delivered the fatal blow, was sentenced to life without parole. Jose Minez, Elvin Garcia, and Antonio Santiago each received 25 years to life, while Manuel Rivera was sentenced to 23 years to life in prison. Leandro Guzman Feliz tragically lost his life for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what happens when a popular music artist is killed in broad daylight, as in the case of Jay and Roy, a rapper popularly known as XXXTentacion? Jose Onfroy was tragically killed during a robbery in Florida on June 18, 2018. The 20-year-old in Roy was out shopping for a motorcycle with his step-uncle, Leonard Kerr. Earlier that day, Onfroy had withdrawn about $50,000 from the bank to make his purchase. The young rapper was unaware that he was being stalked by 4 men: Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Noem, Dedrick Williams, and Robert Allen. Allen even followed in Roy into the dealership to confirm that it was indeed the rapper. Then, as he left the shop, Onfroy's car was intercepted by a black SUV. Armed with guns and their faces covered with masks, Boatwright and Noem stepped out of the SUV and robbed Onfroy at gunpoint. A scuffle ensued, and the 2 men fatally shot the rapper before grabbing his bag of cash and fleeing the scene. A passerby filmed the immediate aftermath of the attack and called 911. Another video captured Onfroy's lifeless body in the driver's seat of his BMW. The tragic incident left the hip-hop industry in shock, with popular artists like Diplo and Jay Cole paying tribute to the teenage sensation. Shortly afterwards, the 4 men were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery.
You are charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree.
However, Robert Allen took a plea deal in exchange for his testimony in the trial of the other 3 men. The trial began with the prosecution claiming that Onfroy's murder was pre-planned and executed with precision.
561. So ask yourselves, that's more than enough time to formulate the premeditated intent and the design to kill someone and the killing.
Boatwright's lawyer suggested that Robert Allen, who had yet to testify against the 3, would lie in court.
Robert Allen is the only person that you will hear from that puts Michael Boatwright at Riva Motorsports on June 18, 2018. But let me be very clear. If Robert Allen testifies in this case, he will lie.
Then, Williams' lawyer incredibly threw accusations at popular hip-hop artist Drake, arguing that the Grammy Award-winning rapper was to be blamed for Onfroy's death, claiming that Drake had a motive before X's death.
And do you think that for one moment, here today, days after the event, he's killed by 2 masked men, right? He came out on social media and said, guys, before he dies, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. Do you think in that time span that they went and they addressed him, they talked to him? No. Do you think sitting here today, years later, any detective has ever asked, Drake or anybody like that? No.
He also accused Robert Allen of getting paid by Drake to testify against the other defendants.
In 2018, did you receive from either Drake or one of Drake's associates?
I never met him.
You never met Drake?
No.
Do you know who he is, though, right?
Finally, Noam's lawyer argued that there was no physical evidence linking his client to the crime.
The evidence will not show that any firearm was ever recovered that could be matched or linked to Trayvon Dusan. The evidence will show no DNA whatsoever found on the body of Mr. Onfroy or on that car.
He was wrong. The prosecution presented a boatload of evidence in court, including CCTV footage from the crime scene. However, it was 3 pieces of damning evidence that ultimately settled the case. The first was the testimony of Onfroy's step-uncle, Leonard Kerr, who fled the scene of the shooting. He described what actually happened that day.
As I tell you, the taller guy went around to Jassay's side. The shorter one now come around to the door that I was, my door that I opened, and he go inside the car. And then I heard something like, hi. How much time I don't know, but I heard something like this.
Kerr also reenacted the moment Onfroy was shot, providing a crucial account of the events.
Come out the effing car, and he was like with a gun. You don't come out the effing car. The shorter one was at Jassay's side.
The second crucial piece of evidence was pictures and videos captured on the day of the shooting, showing the defendants posing and dancing with the stolen money.
It shows Williams fanning $100 bills and surrounded by money. And this video taken at 12:35 a.m. This time Williams appears to be in a car, also fanning $100 bills, smiling and singing.
And finally, the testimony of Robert Allen ultimately sealed the deal, providing the final piece of evidence that convicted the defendants.
Who shoots the shots that are fired?
Michael Boatwright.
And who does he shoot?
Triple X.
Where does he shoot him from? What side of the car?
Allen claimed that Noam grabbed the bag of money, Boatwright shot Onfroy, and Williams was the getaway driver as he sat in the car. Unsurprisingly, the trio were convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael Boatwright received an additional life sentence plus 30 years for being the one who pulled the trigger on Onfroy. As for Robert Allen, his plea deal meant a reduced sentence of 7 years in prison plus 20 years of probation for second-degree murder. Meanwhile, XXXTentacion's promising life was tragically cut short for a few $1,000s. But what happens when an attempted robbery goes horribly wrong? Like in the case of Michael Thomas, who's facing homicide charges in Wisconsin.
Don't do that
reports suggest that in 2011, 16-year-old Thomas was driving around in a stolen minivan with Malik Merchant and Jimmy Scales when they stopped at West Lisbon Avenue and attempted to rob Sharon Staples. Thomas allegedly jumped out of the car and threatened Sharon to give up her purse, but when the 34-year-old resisted, Thomas fatally shot her. Sharon was 12 weeks pregnant at the time. Thomas was arrested and pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree reckless homicide for killing Sharon and her unborn child. At his sentencing, Thomas was initially calm and silent, but then suddenly all hell broke loose. As he was about to leave the courtroom, Thomas looked towards his family and attempted to move towards them. This prompted court deputies to tackle him to the ground, causing an outburst among those sitting in the gallery. The deputies managed to stand him up on his feet, but they couldn't control the teenager. Thomas was restrained and escorted out of the courtroom. The sheriff took hold of the situation and calmed the irate family members down.
Listen, all right, please. No good is going to be done by this courtroom being disrupted, okay? What's going to happen is we are going to allow the other people that were in this courtroom to leave, okay?
Eventually, the crowd started leaving.
No, Sean.
A deputy asked a guy named Chuck to wait, but Chuck was having none of it.
Just wait, okay? We're gonna let everybody go.
Mama right there. Come on, man. Every time I fucking little brother, leave me the fuck alone.
He was promptly cuffed and taken into custody. Ultimately, Michael Thomas was sentenced to 35 years in prison. As for Malik Merchant, who police said acted as a lookout, he was sentenced to 17 years in prison. The getaway driver, Jimmy Scales, who claimed to be a member of the street gang Disciples, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. While Michael Thomas showed great physical strength and defiance in court, what happens when a gang member bursts into tears, like in the case of Brandon Spencer, who's facing attempted murder charges in California? Brandon Spencer, police said, was involved in a shootout at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus in 2012.
He was convicted of shooting a rival gang member at a 2012 Halloween party on the USC campus.
4 people were wounded in the incident. Some students fled the scene while others hid. Reportedly, Spencer also ran with them but was eventually captured by the LAPD. He was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. During his trial, the prosecution argued that Spencer, a known gang member, fired into the crowd in retaliation against a rival gang member.
You are so intent on killing someone that you're willing to shoot them and at the same time open fire into a crowd.
However, Spencer maintained his innocence throughout the trial.
Sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I came to life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
But the jury was having none of it. They found Spencer guilty of all charges.
Then, at his sentencing, as the judge read out his fate, Spencer completely lost it.
The minimum period of parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.
He broke down and banged the table twice with his head before being held back by officers. Ultimately, Spencer was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison for the USC shootings. While Brandon Spencer had a total meltdown in court, how does it compare to a case that terrorized the whole country, like in the case of David Parga, who's on trial for murdering a student in California? In 2006, 27-year-old Leland Washington, an African-American, was reportedly asked to leave a Halloween party where most of the guests were Mexican gang members. Police said Washington came back to the party, which Parga, a La Habra Street gang member, felt was a sign of disrespect. The gangster then walked up to the college graduate and, without provocation, shot him several times in the torso. Washington was rushed to UCI Medical Center, where he died soon after. Parga was arrested and charged with felony murder. He decided to represent himself in court and was eventually found guilty of second-degree murder. During sentencing, family members of Washington addressed their loved one's killer. His brother said Washington did not deserve to go this way.
There's days that the grief is so much that I just kind of muddle through the day. You have to understand who he was. He was such a great person, and the way that he died, he did not deserve that at all.
While their sister spoke about the emptiness left behind by her brother's death.
Halloween weekend will never be the same for us. My brother was murdered that weekend, and it's ironic that we're here today for the sentencing for the person that murdered Leland Cleophas Washington.
The mother of Leland Washington expressed that, if given a chance, her son would have been a great friend to his killer, highlighting the tragic loss and the pain caused by the senseless violence.
He couldn't have been anything but a friend to him. He couldn't have found any other way but to make him a friend.
Parga was also given a chance to speak, where he displayed remorse for his actions and apologized to the victim's family, expressing regret for the senseless violence that took away an innocent life.
I know there's nothing I could do to bring you guys' son back, brother back, but I am deeply sorry for what happened to him. To you specifically, I want to say sorry to what happened to your son. I know the pain you're feeling. My mom comes to see me, she cries because of what's happening to me, and I could only imagine what you're going through. You lost your son.
Joseph Lancia, the president of the Hells Angels biker gang in Rhode Island, was involved in a violent altercation when he fired a gun at a truck driven by Richard Starnino. Starnino, who was once considered a prospect for joining the Hells Angels, had been engaged in an ongoing dispute with Lancia. Although no one was injured in the incident, the situation could have escalated and resulted in serious harm. Lancia was charged with attempted murder, and his position as a leader in the gang made the case particularly high profile. After the shooting incident, where Richard Starnino miraculously survived the attack, a massive raid was conducted at the Hells Angels headquarters. Law enforcement aimed to gather evidence and dismantle the operations of the gang, which had been linked to various criminal activities. The raid was a significant blow to the Hells Angels in Rhode Island as authorities worked to bring those involved in the violent altercation, including Joseph Lancia, to justice.
The bullet struck the passenger side of the vehicle. No one was injured. It should be noted that there were children in the area at that time, and there is a school across the street from the location of this shooting.
Anyone inside 161 Message Street? This is the state police. Come out with your hands up. Do it now.
Some gang members were arrested and taken into custody. Lancia, too, was arrested.
As part of a plea agreement, Joseph Lancia's more severe charges of attempted murder were dropped. Instead, he pleaded no contest to felony assault and battery. This plea deal allowed him to avoid a lengthy sentence for attempted murder, but he still faced significant legal consequences for his actions. The charges reflected the seriousness of the incident, but the reduction in charges highlighted the legal maneuvering that often takes place in high-profile cases involving gang members. Paul Wade, a 31-year-old man, stands accused of murdering Edward Lamont Smith and Alexis Missy in Louisville, Kentucky. Today, he is appearing at Jefferson County Court before Judge Haney for a preliminary hearing. The proceedings begin on a polite note as defense attorney Aaron Kennedy exchanges cordial greetings with the judge while Wade is escorted into the courtroom.
Now I will say good afternoon. It just turned noon, so good afternoon. Aaron Kennedy Strikesman. I'm standing in for Rob Eggert on behalf of Paul Wade. This is a little bit different. Mr. Eggert is retained on...
However, as Starsman introduces her client, a disturbance begins to build in the gallery. The crowd grows restless, prompting a loud shush from the sheriff's deputy. At the center of the mounting disruption is a woman seated behind the front row at the far right end of the bench. Sensing the escalating unease, the court officers take no chances. A second deputy leaves his post near the judge's bench to approach the woman and issue her a stern warning.
Mr. Eggert is retained on the 2 revocations.
Despite the warning, the woman grows increasingly belligerent, causing further disruption. The judge pauses the proceedings as the deputy climbs over the railings to address her directly, warning that another outburst will result in her removal. However, the judge has already had enough and swiftly orders the woman to leave the courtroom.
Ma'am, you're going to have to leave the courtroom.
We all family.
Okay, y'all got to not talk. Okay. No talking in the courtroom. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Peace seems to be restored to the courtroom, and the remainder of the hearing proceeds without incident. However, as Wade is being let out at the end, chaos erupts, disrupting the proceedings entirely. The defendant strides toward the door, flanked by a deputy, but as he passes the gallery, the victim's family members erupt in anger, rising from their seats in a storm of profanity. Chaos ensues as the second deputy rushes toward the gallery, attempting to contain the situation. As tensions escalate, the deputy scales the gate to hold back the enraged crowd swarming around Wade. The camera view shifts to Judge Haney, and while the chaos in the courtroom is no longer visible, her expression speaks volumes. Off camera, Wade is seen running toward the judge's bench, pursued by an enraged gallery member. As Wade escapes through a door to the side of the bench, his pursuer leaps onto the bench and jumps past Judge Haney. Remarkably, despite the pandemonium, Judge Haney remains composed, keeping her seat throughout the ordeal. Eventually, after repeated cries for assistance, one of the deputies takes notice of the situation. The judge, maintaining her composure, motions toward the door to indicate that Wade has fled the courtroom. The chaos continues to echo from the hallway, where the commotion reaches its peak. Amid the uproar, Wade is once again apprehended by law enforcement. As a result of the incident, 4 men were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and obstructing governmental operations. In highly emotional cases like this, herd mentality often takes over, fueling chaotic outbursts. However, more often than not, courtroom disruptions are instigated by a single lone wolf, such as Jason Wilson. Jason Wilson is in court to deliver a victim impact statement following the murder of his sister, Misty, after her husband, Tristan Laro, pleaded guilty to the crime. Misty's body was discovered on the bathroom floor of the couple's apartment, having been shot 5 times in the head with a handgun. As Wilson walks through the gate toward the podium, he fixes Lara with a long, hard stare. Wilson begins his statement before Judge G. Michael Westfall, describing the profound impact his sister's death has had on his life. Overcome with emotion, his voice falters as he speaks. Meanwhile, Laro remains unfazed, rocking nonchalantly in his chair. Unable to contain his grief and frustration, Wilson turns directly to Laro, demanding to know why he committed the heinous act, and what happens next is truly unbelievable. As deputies rush to push Wilson back, Laro suddenly moves as though he's preparing to retaliate. A deputy swiftly intervenes, jumping in from behind, wrapping his arms around Laro and pulling him backwards to the ground. On the other side of the table, Wilson is met with the same rough treatment as deputies fight to restrain both men. On the ground, it becomes clear that Wilson is resisting more forcefully, while Laro lies there, seemingly passive. Let's watch again how quickly the entire incident unfolds. Wilson is eventually subdued and handcuffed. As deputies pull him back to his feet, he apologizes profusely for his outburst. He is then led from the courtroom. Despite Iron County Attorney Scott Garrett stating plans to charge Wilson with disorderly conduct, no charges are filed in the end. Tristan Laro is sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder of Misty. Lashing out at the defendant in retaliation for the murder of a loved one is one of the most common causes of physical altercations in the courtroom. However, on rare occasions, the aggressors end up protesting in favor of the defendant, as seen in the case of Judge Tracy Hunter. As a former judge, Hunter has experienced a massive fall from grace and now finds herself before Judge Patrick Dinkelacker at Hamilton County Common Pleas Court in Cincinnati. She was originally convicted of charges related to abuse of power after leaking confidential documents to her brother, allowing him to keep his job as a corrections officer. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but with her extensive knowledge of the legal system, Hunter managed to drag the appeals process out for an astonishing 6 years, staying free while pursuing her case through the courts. However, she has now exhausted all avenues of appeal and is in court today to determine whether the 6-month sentence will finally be imposed. Unlike most defendants, Hunter has developed a cult following, with many reporters believing her conviction to be politically motivated. Crowds of supporters have gathered both inside and outside the courtroom, and tensions are running high. Unfortunately for Hunter, her luck has run out as Judge Dinkelacker orders that she serve the entire sentence, setting in motion an extraordinary chain of events.
1, you pay the cost of these proceedings. Number 2, you are to do not violate any laws. And number 3, you are to do 6 months in the Hamilton County Justice Center, credit 1 day. Mr. or Ms. Deputy can take her away.
As the former judge stands, a collective outcry erupts from the gallery. Her supporters begin shouting in protest, voicing their discontent over the ruling. The deputies standing in the center aisle turn to the left, raising their arms in an attempt to calm the crowd. However, as they do so, a woman on the right-hand side of the gallery sees her opportunity and stands, rushing toward Hunter without interruption. As she nears her destination, the deputy closest to the podium spots her and frantically moves to stop her. The rising tension suddenly boils over. As one of the deputies moves to lead Hunter from the courtroom, she begins to struggle before going limp. By now, the gallery is in an uproar, and supporters cry out, "No justice!" The judge-turned-felon is then dragged unceremoniously from the courtroom. The woman who attempted to approach Hunter is handcuffed and led out of the courtroom by officers. The remainder of Hunter's supporters are still incensed as they exit, rallying outside the courthouse, chanting and marching in protest. Despite the chaos, Hunter ultimately serves just 3 months of her sentence before being released. While her support from the public was strong and the courtroom drama may have been out of line, the ultimate intention of her supporters was seen as morally upstanding. However, as we see in the next case, this isn't always the case. At the Marion County Judicial Center in Florida, Travis Davis has just been found guilty of first-degree murder, alongside co-defendants Brandon Banks, Kelvin Grimmage, and Kella Richardson. The four men are facing life in prison for shooting homeowner Courtney London during a home robbery in Ocala. Tensions are running high after the delivery of the verdict, and due to the known volatile nature of the defendants, extra deputies have been drafted in to maintain control in the courtroom. As the judge proceeds with the hearing, he asks the prosecutor if they can move forward with sentencing.
Any legal reason we shouldn't proceed with sentencing today?
Everything seems to be proceeding normally in the courtroom, but unbeknownst to everyone, things are about to take a shocking turn. Watch closely as Davis reacts just before the judge delivers the sentence. A deputy behind him attempts to cuff him, but Davis quickly yanks his hand away. Sensing the danger, the deputy immediately grabs Davis from behind, but that's when the situation escalates. A second deputy rushes toward co-defendant Grimmage to cuff him. As the deputy leans over the table, Grimmage pulls back. Davis uses his body weight to throw himself onto the table in front of him, while Grimmage joins in, grappling with the deputy and throwing punches. The chaos continues as both men are eventually dragged to the ground. Meanwhile, Davis is wrestled to the ground but manages to get back up, swinging his fists wildly as he lashes out at the deputies and even at his own defense attorney, who eventually escapes around the side of the table. With the courtroom in chaos, the deputy at the back steps in and unleashes his taser on Davis, causing him to fall to the ground. Grimmage and Banks are also tased, though Banks hasn't joined in the chaos. Luckily for Richardson, he had already been handcuffed and was rushed to the side of the courtroom when the melee erupted. The public in the gallery are up in arms, shouting and reacting to the chaos unfolding in the courtroom. A deputy orders them to leave, but many are reluctant to go, clearly upset by the violent disruption. The tension in the courtroom escalates as the deputies work to restore order and remove the unruly onlookers. The room is eventually cleared, and the deputies regain control, bringing Davis and Grimmage into the center of the courtroom. Although they ultimately face no charges related to the brawl, all four defendants in the Davis case are sentenced to life without parole for the murder. In such cases, the chaos in the courtroom has no bearing on the verdict or sentence. However, in the case of Carl Williams, the outcome of his trial was dramatically altered after a courtroom incident. Williams is on trial in DeKalb County for shooting and killing his girlfriend, Donana Jackson. He claims the gun went off accidentally while he was showing it to her. In the courtroom, after closing arguments, the jury exits and Williams stays behind to speak with his lawyer. The mood is calm until suddenly, a person from the public gallery rushes up to the defense table and attacks Williams. A brawl ensues, with fists flying as family members of Donana Jackson join in, swarming Williams. His defense attorney is caught in the chaos, pushed and pulled. Deputies rush in to separate the groups, arresting the individual who instigated the incident. Despite the warning, the woman grows increasingly belligerent, causing further disruption. The judge pauses the proceedings as the deputy climbs over the railings to address her directly, warning that another outburst will result in her removal. However, the judge has already had enough and swiftly orders the woman to leave the courtroom. The jury, who were in an adjoining room, hear the entire commotion, and as a result, a mistrial is granted to Williams. No retrial has been brought before the courts to date. The attack on Williams was a physical one, designed to cause as much damage as possible in a short amount of time. However, sometimes, as the next clip shows, verbal altercations can also lead to chaos in the courtroom. Lucas Lucas Kendall is appearing in Miami-Dade criminal court for a pre-trial hearing. The former bodybuilder is charged with killing Kewan Bird and attempting to kill Michael Smathers outside a Miami strip club. Kendall claims that Bird and Smathers were watching him menacingly from their vehicle, and when he went to grab something from his own car, the two men jumped out and threatened to kill him. Kendall then pulled out his Glock and began shooting, killing Bird and paralyzing Smathers. It was later revealed that neither man was armed, and Smathers denied that any words were spoken to Kendall. Kendall, who has been diagnosed with several mental disorders, is in court to determine his competency to stand trial, Bird's family and friends are present, including his father, Donald. The hearing begins calmly as the judge discusses Kendall's competency before moving on to the matter of where Kendall should be detained.
And then the issue is that you want him housed where?
At the same facility he's been housed.
In order to prevent him from decompensating?
Yes, Your Honor. He eventually decompensated to the point where he was sitting in a fetal position, naked, not eating, and not interacting with any human being.
While undergoing psychiatric evaluation and treatment, Kendall was moved from jail to a mental hospital. His attorney is now arguing that he should be returned to the hospital instead of being sent back to jail. Meanwhile, in the public gallery, Donald Byrd, the father of Kewan Byrd, is growing increasingly angry with the ongoing discussion. His emotions are building up, and it's all about to boil over as he loses control.
He needed to go to prison, man. Come on, Let's go. He want to play crazy. He wasn't crazy when he killed my son, man. He wasn't crazy then, but he crazy now. All of a sudden he crazy now. You want to lay in a mental hospital? You done murdered my son, man, for nothing. When he was trying to get away from you, you were trying to get away from you, man. And you kept shooting him while his back was under the truck. You kept shooting him, man. You kept shooting him. His back was turned to you, man. He was trying to get away from you, and you murdered him, man, like you. You murdered him, man, like that.
The situation with Kevin Lyons escalates quickly after his handcuffs are placed in front of him instead of behind, a decision that turns dangerous. As he exits the holding cell, the male officer initially has control, but Lyons spins around, pulling both officers to the ground. Despite the officer's best efforts to subdue him, Lyons displays impressive strength, even kicking the female officer in the head, knocking her to the floor. He then manages to slip his handcuffs off, using them to choke the male officer, creating a perilous situation. The female officer, using a baton to try to stop him, is unsuccessful at first. After a tense struggle, the officers finally manage to subdue Lyons and pin him to the ground with the arrival of a third officer for backup. The officers, ensuring that they take no chances after the intense struggle, work together to securely restrain Lyons. Despite the chaotic situation, Lyons remains calm and even engages in casual conversation with them, discussing his history of violence as they continue to secure his hands. His demeanor suggests that he is accustomed to such interactions, showing little concern for the severity of the situation. After the officers are sure that Lyons is no longer a threat, they manage to bring him to his feet. However, Lyons refuses to back down and continues to resist. He starts making unsubstantiated claims, alleging that the officer started it by jumping on him. Despite his attempts to shift the blame, the officers remain calm and continue to control the situation, ensuring his compliance as they move forward.
You see my record? No, I haven't. Well, I hope you don't see it.
After being returned to his cell, Lyons continues to complain, insisting that he is the victim of the situation. However, thanks to the surveillance camera that recorded the entire incident, his claims hold no weight.
Okay, you know me. He's crooked as That's what it is. Okay. That's messed up. So, I didn't do to him. He wants to grab me on wrist and start kneeing me, recording. Yeah, the camera thing on cash in.
The male officer involved in the altercation sustains lacerations to his face and ear due to Lyons' violent actions. As a result, Lyons' simple DUI charge is escalated to 2 counts of aggravated assault against a corrections officer, leading to an 18-month sentence at Douglas State Prison. In some cases, however, the frustration and anger extend beyond the convict and toward the victims' families. One example of this is David Chavez, where his loved one's anger at his incarceration leads to outbursts directed at the victim's family. And there you have it, some of the most intense and chaotic moments from courtrooms where tempers flared and situations spiraled out of control. These events serve as a reminder of the high emotions that often accompany legal battles and the lengths some will go to when pushed to their limits. Whether it's a violent outburst or an emotional breakdown, these incidents highlight just how unpredictable courtrooms can be. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more stories from the heart of the justice system.